See how it works? Magic. Oh my good God. This is Wednesday, May 27th, 6th period, and I'm trying not to strangle children. Where did we leave off yesterday?
14.
The guy was taking you back.
I'm going to try and do as speedily as I can through this one and try to get through both. If I do not get through both, you can go back and watch 4th periods, because 4th period I got pretty much through all of the whole story, because I've been having a little bit of a tough time today, so we'll see what I can do. Because tomorrow I will not, because we have a whole different thing. Alright, give me a second to get my mind going back in the right direction. So I was walking, I'd stolen the banaka, it was in my pocket, I was walking out the front door, I got through the first door, grabbed onto the second door, and then the hand came down on my shoulder. Did he talk yet?
Yep.
Yeah.
Dragging you through.
Where do you think you're going?
You went back to the school.
Were we going back to the store?
Yeah.
Alright, so I'm going back to the store this time.
Yeah.
Have I gotten to the room?
No.
Okay. So, thank you much. So, alright. I am going, he's walking me back to the store, and he has the hand on my shoulder, and he had the packaging in his hand also, because apparently he pulled that out from where I stuck it on the shelf. And as he walked back, he had, I gave him the banaka, and he had the packaging in his hand, and the other hand on my shoulder, and I remember all the other wrestlers staring at me as I walked by, which sucks. And I remember like people in the store staring at me and stuff like that, and me trying not to look at them, and just little looks to the side, and like, oh, yeah, it sucks, you're all staring at me. And taking me to the back room. They had the swinging doors in the back of the place. I remember him taking me through their little swinging doors, and in there he put down the packaging and the banaka down to the left and just sort of set it down, and then went into, took me into the middle of this the storage room, like where they have all the stock on the shelves, like where the employees go to, and he, Gesundheit, grabbed a chair, much like my ones there, which, by the way, if you have over 50 points and you've not signed by your way yet, Gesundheit again, you're more than welcome to if you want to go over and sign it. Grabbed a chair like those, except they had just the 4 legs, not like the one that has the little bar at the bottom. Remember him, much like in the first Pitch Perfect, he dragged out the chair, did that scrapey sound, and he dragged it across, and then slammed it down, and he's like, sit down. I'm like, oh. I remember sitting in this chair. It was just a chair in the middle of this huge room. I'm just sitting in a chair by myself. And then he went over and used the little wall phone, and then he called the police. And he was like, I have a shoplifter, I have him in custody, he's in the room. And then he got done with that. I remember him turning to look at me, and he goes like, hey, kid, stay here. And then he left. And then just left me sitting in this room by myself. And it's just this huge, open, cavernous area. And it was weird, things going through my head. I had 3 things that went through my head that I can remember. One, for my English class, we had to memorize a poem and do it as a speech. And to keep myself from crying, because when you really screw up, crying is just what you want to do. I don't think it matters how manly you are. At some point, you're just like, I just want to cry. It lets the sad out. And I remember like, I'm going to man up. I'm not going to cry. And I remember going through and saying this speech over and over in my head. It was a Shel Silverstein poem. It was called The Queen is Coming. And I remember doing that poem just over and over in my head. And then the other thing I was thinking about was gangster rap was really popular. And I was listening to NWA and Eazy-E and Public Enemy. And I was listening to that a lot of times. And in there, the prophets, Dr. Dre and Ice Cube, tell you that when you get picked up by the police, that you're supposed to stay tough, stay hard, and you don't tell them your name, no matter how much they torture you. And I remember thinking that I was not going to give up my name, and the fact that I was going to stay tough, a skinny, lily white boy, no matter what they threw at me. Which is ridiculous because I was so not tough. But in my head, that's what I was telling myself. And the other thing I remember is looking over to my right, and there was a wall about as far away as that one is. In the middle of the wall was an exit door, and it just said, exit, alarm will sound if used. And I remember sitting there convincing myself whether or not I should just get up and go out that door. Because I figured by the time they came in to get to me, I would be gone, and they would never find me. And all of my wrestling friends were probably gone from inside the store, and there's no way that they would be able to chase me in time. And I would like to tell you it was my moral strength that kept me there, and the fact that I knew it would be the wrong thing to do, but that's not what did it. What kept me there was the guy's comment earlier about the fact that he had me on video. And in my head, I could see them bringing that videotape into school and like showing it to the office and having them identify me, and then going to my classroom with cops and pulling me out of the classroom and arresting me there. And so I was like, that would be so much worse than this. So I decided to stay there. If they hadn't had videotape, I don't know if I would have run or not. Looking back on it, I was that scared that was the only thing that was keeping me there, is his mention of having me on videotape. And so I stayed there for it. And I remember eventually the cop came in through the big swinging doors, and he walks in. He was a big guy, an older fella. You remember he had the door swinging open, he came in with the pharmacist, and he picked up the crumpled packaging and the Banaka spray, and he put it in his officer's pocket thing. I remember him looking over, he was like, so that's the thief? And the guy was like, yeah. And he was like, all right, stand up, thief. That's all he ever called me the whole time. He just always called me thief. I stood up, and he came over, and I don't remember if he read me my rights or not. There's every chance he did. That part blocked out. I remember it is putting on the handcuffs, and he did them behind my back, and it was incredibly uncomfortable. If you've never had handcuffs on, that's good. And hopefully you keep that going. But handcuffs being put on by an unhappy policeman hurt. They're very cold, and even though you know they're hard, it's hard to describe the hard pinchiness that comes as it hits your bone. And it hurt just a lot. It's like snapped onto my bones. It's like, ow! He's like, that hurt? I'm like, yeah! And he's like, good. I'm like, oh. And I remember him taking me back to the store, and he grabbed my arm and lifted me up on one side. And so my arms came around that way, and he walked me back through the store. And I remember walking through the store, looking around, and being glad that I didn't see any of my friends there. And be like, oh, well, thank goodness for a small miracle. But I did see, as I was walking through, a mom and her small daughter, I'm guessing like 4 or 5 years old, and the mom seeing the police officer, seeing me in the handcuffs, and the mom taking her daughter and moving her daughter behind her when she saw me. And it was a small thing, but it's weird how that stays with me almost more than anything else. That feeling that I was that scummy person that parents had to protect their children from. It stabbed me more than almost anything else that happened during that time. Was just that thinking of myself as that type of person. And led me out through the front of the store, and went through the front area, doors opened, and from I remember as we walked across, his police car was parked right out in front, and the lights were going, but not the sirens, just the lights were spinning. And I remember walking through the glass doors, and I remember as I walked through the glass doors thinking, the last time I had my hand on this glass door, I was free, and now so not free. And then looking to my right, down the length of the building, to the corner of the building, and seeing heads popping out from around the corner. And it was my friends on the wrestling team who had come to watch me get arrested, because that's what friends do. They watch you when you're an idiot. And it was like a little totem pole, like these little heads like all peeking around the side. I remember the cops seeing them and laughing and thinking it was funny. He was like, thief, you got yourself a fan club. And so I was just like, oh, that sucks. And then he put me into the front. I remember he put me into the front seat and not the back seat of the police car. And I couldn't get in easily because my hands were still handcuffed behind me. He didn't take the handcuffs off. And so I was like, it's hard to sit down when you're trying to get into a car and you can't use your arms. I'm like, so he had to grab my arm. And I remember there was a shotgun bolted to the dashboard, like an emergency one to just shoot people with. But it was right there. And I remember having to move my head around it because it was pointing up and it was like so close. When I got in, I'd like move my chin around the shotgun, and I'm like, that's awkward and really weird. And then I sat down and I couldn't do the seatbelt because hands behind my back. So he leaned in and did my seatbelt for me and snapped it in. And I remember after he snapped it in, as he stood back up, what he said to me was, thief, while you're in my car, try not to steal anything. And he just said it with disgust that it hurt. And I was just like, that's just mean. I'm handcuffed in your car. I have no chance of stealing anything. It's just a jerk thing to do. But I was a thief. I can't knock him for it. And then he came around and then drove me to the police station. It was a short drive because the police station was like all of 2 minutes away. So it didn't take very long to get there. Nobles is not a very big town. And so it took 2 minutes or so to get there. I don't remember the drive. I remember at the police station. I don't remember them taking off the handcuffs. I know they had to at some point, but I don't remember it. What I remember is sitting in the police officer's office, which had like a glass wall on one side. It was not big. I mean, like my desk area, if you put walls around it, that would be the size of his office. It was small. And there's like his little desk on the inside of it, like a little computer and a chair on the other side of it. And he sat on one side and he called my mom, and that was a horrible conversation. And I can only hear his side. He's like, yeah, I had your son here at the police station. He was arrested, shoplifting. Yes, it's him. And so all that, and I was just like, oh, I do not want to know what my mom's going to say. That's just sickening. And so then he was like, she'll be here in a little bit. And he sat there and, like, I don't know, typed stuff into the little computer thing. This kid is a thief. And so I remember sitting there in a little chair across from him, and I was just trying to figure out what to do to keep myself from crying. Once again, staying strong. And so I was looking around the room trying to find something to distract myself, and one whole wall was wanted posters, like you see at the post office, stuff like that. It had a bunch of different people and like what they did their crimes for. And so I was staring at those, trying to distract myself, when the cop looked up and saw me staring at them. And once again, I remember his comment again, as he looked at me and he goes, oh, you have family up there? That's your future? Is that what you're going to end up doing? Is that you? And I was really like, oh, that was a jerk thing to say too. And I'm sure I came back with something like, no. And so I just sat there. Then eventually my mom showed up. And when my mom showed up, it was tough because she didn't yell at me, because yelling would have been easier. She let me know how much I disappointed her. It was just, at some point, I know we had the conversations, either while we were in that room or walking out or going to the car, where it's just, I remember she hugged me at one point and let me know that she still loved me. But what she said was, you understand that your life changes from this point going forward. The who you are now is not the who you are or who you were yesterday. Because yesterday you were a son that I loved and trusted. Today you're just a son that I love. And you need to understand that. And that hurts. There's no other way to get into that one. It was painful. And so and I remember sitting in the car, and she was driving, and she didn't really talk to me during the drive. I remember sitting in the front passenger seat of a gray Pontiac Bonneville, and I put my feet up on the dashboard, and I had my arms around my legs, and my head pushed against the cold glass of the window, because it was in late October, early November-ish. And I remember just looking out the window while my mom drove, and I remember the thoughts going through my head about the fact that I'd just ruined my life. The fact that I was just starting high school, and the fact that, as far as I was concerned, my life was over, because nothing would be the same after that point. I did not know, going to school the next day, what my friends would say, how they were going to look at me differently, how the kids in class would look at me differently. I didn't know how teachers would look at me from that point forward. I mean, I was in a couple of advanced classes and stuff like that, and I figured teachers would know, and it was going to change how they saw me. I didn't know how this was going to change how I ever tried to get a job. I was 14. I wanted to get a job soon. I figured this might change that forever. If I tried to ask out a girl, is this the first thing that she's going to think about? If I try to ask her out, she's like, aren't you the kid that got arrested for breast from? Like, so all of that is going through my head. And we get home, and my mom just tells me, hey, you should probably head up to your room, and when your dad gets home, we'll come up and talk to you. And I did. I remember going up, laying on the bed, staring at the ceiling until my dad got home. My dad, much like I am now, was not a yeller. He just came in with my mom, and they talked, and they said, we're not really going to ground you, because there's not much punishment we can give you that's going to be worse than what life is going to do to you, because your life is going to change beyond anything we can control, and life is going to punish you. And I think you're going to need our support more than our punishment right now. And they were right, because life did punish me. And they said, I don't think you're ever going to do this again. And I'm like, oh, God, no. And I never did, because it had an impact on me. One of the worst punishments they gave me was they made me go to school the next day. I really did not want to do that, but that was like, that's part of your punishment. It's like, you go to school and you face the decision that you made. And so I went to school the next day, and kids are horrible. There's no really easy way to put that. Kids are horrible, horrible little creatures sometimes. And when they have a reason to attack, they will. And they attacked me. Part of it I was ready for. The name calling me thief in the hallway and stuff like that, calling me Banaka, calling me breath spray. That I was ready for. The names I could shrug off. It wasn't that bad. the writing stuff on the piece of paper, throwing it at me, that stuff that happens. What hurt me more was the things kids did they didn't know they were doing. That was just unconscious. I remember walking into my English class, the kids I'd known for years that I was friends with, and walking in, and there were a couple of girls who looked up and saw me, and they had stuff on their desk, like pencil pouches like that. And I remember them reaching over and putting all of their pencils into their pencil pouches and moving them off their desk. And while they looked at me, and it was that impression of I was going to steal their stuff if they didn't put it away. And it was just that realizing that that was their opinion of me, that it had changed, that they now saw me as this other person that they could no longer trust. And they didn't do it to be mean or to bully me, but honestly, it hurt more than any of the name calling that happened that day. I remember that image more than I remember anything else along that next day, was just those girls cleaning up their stuff and staring at me like I was this scary, scummy person walking into the room, and that's what hurt. Going forward from there, I had to go to court to get a court date and go in front of a judge. If you've ever been to Noblesville, Noblesville has a town square. It has like an actual town square, like a big building with a clock tower on top. That clock tower building, that's where I got to go in front of a judge. And so that was where I got to go to that big building, and I got to wear a little shirt and tie and go in front of a judge. When I went in front of the judge was stern when he talked to me. But I remember I had to step up, and he read the information. He was like, "You stole breath spray," and I was like, "Yeah." I remember him making fun of me. He was like, "You have trouble with the ladies?" I'm like, I don't know. And he was like, "You need breath spray?" And I'm like, "Probably." Making me feel bad already, thanks. And I remember him saying, "All right, here's what we're going to do. You have good grades in school." I actually had all A's at that time. It was like the only semester I ever had all A's. Yay, that one time. He was like, "You have good grades in school." And he's like, "You've not gotten in trouble in school," what I see here. "And you've never gotten in trouble with the law before." 7 years old. Well, that's not my record. And so I was like, sounds good to me so far. He goes, "So here's what we're going to do. We're going to do what's called deferred probation." I'm like, I have no idea what that means. He goes, "Here's what deferred probation means. As of right now, I'm not going to punish you on the agreement that you don't ever get in trouble with the law between now and the time you turn 18. As long as you never have your name come across a police officer's desk between now and the day you turn 18, this disappears like it never happened. It gets wiped off your record. But if you ever have your name get pulled by a police officer, two things are going to happen. One, you will not be let go for anything. Even if it's just out past curfew and they run your names and your friends give up their names, they get to go home. You do not. You will get pulled in for anything if a cop sees it. I'm putting it on your record that if you are ever seen and a cop has reason to suspect, you get pulled in, brought into custody, parents called, and you will come before me again. The second thing that's going to happen is I will give you the full punishment for whatever it is you get in trouble for. And I will give you the full punishment for what you just got in trouble for today. You will get both punishments. It's like, do you understand? I'm like, oh, I understand. Please don't do horrible things to me. And so that was what happened. So I eventually got off for that as long as I never got in trouble again. So with that, as much as the arrest sucked and changed my life, oddly enough, it also helped me. The reason it helped me is that it made me paranoid to get in trouble throughout all of high school. And in high school, you give a lot of chances to make poor choices. And throughout that time, this helped give me a reason to not make poor choices. I had two reasons not to make poor choices. One was my arrest, and then the other one was my family has issues. I'm the most normal person in my family, and that's not my opinion. That's from my family, and I've told them on a number of cases that's not right, because this is not normal on any level. But I am so much more normal than the rest of my family. I'm the only one that's not served jail time. Been arrested, not been in jail. I'm the only member of my family that has not had drug and alcohol abuse. Everyone in my family has drug and alcohol problems. Growing up, my uncle was always in and out of jail, went to prison for cocaine. My stepbrother been in jail for drinking and driving, and my stepbrother for marijuana. My real brother also for the same thing. And so it's gone through my family. My grandparents are alcoholics. they're both gone now. But I remember growing up and not being able to go out to dinner with them after 4 o'clock in the afternoon because they would get thrown out of any restaurant we went to. And growing up knowing that drugs and alcohol had a bad effect on my bloodline, that my blood, for whatever reason, drugs and alcohol do horrible things to. And I was paranoid about that happening to me, about what would happen if I ever tried drinking or drugs. And the arrest gave me a reason to not drink while I was in high school because I was paranoid of getting in trouble. And I had friends who drank, and I had friends who smoked pot, and I'd still hang out with them because they were friends of mine in junior high, and then their lives took a turn, but that's a story for another day. But I'd still hang out with them, but I would not drink or do drugs myself. I was like, hey, criminal record. I was like, I can't. So they were going to a party. I'm like, listen, I'll catch you guys afterwards. If you need a ride, let me know, but I'm not going to go to the party myself. And so it gave me a reason to make good choices, which is weird looking back on it now. I don't know if I'd be here today as a teacher if I hadn't been arrested when I was 14. Because if I hadn't had that as an excuse in order to not make poor choices, I don't know if I'd have been strong enough to not make poor choices. And the fact that it kept me from not doing drugs or drinking when I was in high school. Because if I would have gone down that path, it would have changed everything. Because it's in my bloodline that bad things would have happened. So as bad as that arrest was, it helped make me a better person. I didn't see it at the time, but looking back on it now, I do. And there were a couple other things that I remember. One was the wrestling team, and I got beat up on the wrestling team, which was something awful. Once again, that's a story for another day. But I remember one day, a couple weeks later, I was sitting in the hallway after school for a wrestling meet, because I didn't go to McDonald's, I didn't go out to the CVS and all that after when we had wrestling. So I'm like, I'm just staying at school. I'm going to do homework in the hallway like a nice little dork, and I'm not going to worry about things. And so I didn't have to worry about going out there. It's like, I'm not getting arrested again. So I remember I sat in just a hallway, and I just did homework back there, and everything was good. And I'm sitting back there one day after school, just by myself in the hallway, and I look up, and I see a kid walking down the hallway towards me, and he was a scary kid. Because in Noblesville, we had scary kids. Remember the Outsiders? We had kids that were like Dally. And we had a bunch of them who brought knives to school and would show you their knives and stuff like that. And so he was one of them. He was in my grade, but he was a couple years older than me, if you understand what I'm saying. And so I remember looking up and seeing him being like, oh crap. I'm like, I don't see you. I'm looking everywhere but in your direction. And I remember him walking right up to me. And I remember like looking down and like seeing his boots right here next to me. Like, I'm not looking up, not looking up. And eventually he spoke. He's like, are you Broviac? I'm like, uh-huh. He's like, you the kid that got arrested for stealing breath spray? I was like, yeah. I looked up at him. He looked at me for a second. Like he was puzzled. And he goes, it gets better. I went, what? He goes, it gets better, kid. He's like, when I was in 8th grade, I got arrested for stealing pencils. It's the worst choice I ever made. Friends made fun of me. My dad made fun of me. And I thought my life was going to end because it was the worst thing I could imagine. And I just went, uh-huh. He goes, a couple weeks went by, something else happened, kids forgot about it. But there was about a month where my life was awful, and I thought it was going to end. Is that what it's like? Uh-huh. He goes, stay strong, it gets better. And he just walked away. I was just like, okay. To this day, one of the weirdest situations I've ever been in. But it was just him reaching out, being nice. And he was right. It did get better. It took another week, 2 weeks, something like that. And then kids moved on. And they found somebody else to make fun of. And they found somebody else to give a hard time to. And the making fun of me faded to the background. And my life went back to being normal again. And it was just the thought about this random kid stopping. That's really loud. This random kid just stopping to be nice to me. It's the ripples in life. He never would have imagined that him stopping to talk to me in the hallway would make enough of a difference where 20 years later I'm telling you a story about that same thing. But it is. It's the little things you do in life. And so that was his little thing, and it did help me. And I thought, if that guy can do it, then I can do it. And it did. It helped me get through it. And I got through high school the next 4 years without drinking or doing drugs because I was paranoid about what it would do. And I turned 18 at the end of my senior year because May birthday hasn't changed yet. And so I turned 18. I got excited, like, woohoo, clean record. But I didn't know how quickly that worked if it like would still be on there or not. So I remember that year between like high school and college, like still don't want to get in trouble because I would hate to all be like, hey, this thing's still on here. Like it's supposed to be gone. It's not. So I was like, let's just play it safe for a little bit. So I remember I finally got a chance to go to college come August, and I went to IU. And at IU, you can't really bring your car with you because there's just not enough room. And I remember in my dorm, I was at Wilkie, there's like 1,000 people that live in this dorm, and like 50 kids get to bring cars. And I was one of the lucky 50 because I saved up my money, and then I had to camp out to get a parking pass, and I camped out to get a parking pass. So I was one of the 50 kids that got to have a parking space at Wilkie. So I was one of the few people that could drive, and it was awesome. The drawback was I had a small car. I had a sports car, a little 2-seater Mazda RX-7, which is the 2 seats, and has the back of it is a hatchback where it just has like a big glass dome area where you can see into the car the whole way through. So we would, being idiots, drive like 5 or 6 people around. Me, and then a friend in the passenger seat, and then someone sitting on their lap, and then like 3 kids smashed in this back window. And we'd have to like push on the window to get it to close. They make like squeaky sounds each time you did it, and it would latch like good to go, like and then we'd drive around like to go get groceries or the movies or something like that. And it was awesome because I had all the room I wanted because driver. And so it worked out well. So that year I made friends with a whole bunch of people on my dorm floor. One of them, a guy named Joshua Fisher, we called him Fish, and another kid by the name of Mariah Simmons, we called him Mo. Mo turned 19 in November, and we were going to throw him a party for his birthday. But everyone on the dorm floor drank, so they were going to sneak in a whole bunch of beer for his party. And I was not going to do that. So like, still paranoid, don't want to get in trouble, totally not worth it, so I'm not going to be involved in that. And so I was like, that's fine. I was like, you guys can throw the party, I'll give him a gift later, something like that. Just let me know when it's over, and I'll hang out with you guys then. And Fish came to talk to me later, and Fish goes, listen, bro, we have a request of you. I'm like, what's up? He's like, you know the party? And I'm like, yeah, I'm not going. He's like, that's fine. Here's the issue. I have someone to buy beer. I have a friend of mine that's 21. I'm like, go for you. He's like, we don't have a car to go get the beer. And I'm like, I know where this is going. And he's like, can we borrow your car? And I'm like, oh, I'm seeing him driving my car, and Fish was a little reckless. He was on the crazy side. I'm like, oh, that's going to be a good idea. Because then you wreck my car, and it's full of beer, and a guy I don't know, it's not on insurance, my car gets taken away, my parents kill me. And I go, that does not strike me as a good idea. But they're friends, and I like them, and I want to help them out. And so I was like, hey, friends, what do you got to do? And so how about this? I'll drive you instead.
Oh my God.
I'm trying to be helpful. I'm like, I'll drive you. That way I know you don't wreck my car and everything will be all right. He's like, hey, you don't mind? I'm like, I don't mind. He's like, it's going to be 3 of us. I'm like, that's fine. Because then the 21-year-old sat in the passenger seat, and then Fish, because I didn't know the other guy. I'm like, this is kind of creepy, just him and me hanging out together. And I'm like, and so Fish sat in the back. I'm like, just like closed him in. There's like fish in a big fish bowl. It was deep. And so then we drove around that night buying a whole bunch of beer. More beer than I'd ever seen in my life. I grew up with alcoholics. There's still more beer than I'd ever seen. They bought cases of beer. In the case that we had like the 24 and 30 packs, they just bought case upon case. It was enough that the back of my car like sank down a little bit. Well, there was that much in the back of it. And so I kept getting more and more nervous every time we'd go to like a new liquor store, and they're like, buying more. They keep throwing it into the back to the point where like Fish had like nowhere to sit, and he's like halfway in the front. So I'm like, let's go back. I'm like, I'm getting really nervous here. Because we weren't dumb, we had a blanket, and we threw a blanket over all of it, so you can't tell, it's perfectly fine. It's like a big lumpy blanket and boys in a car, perfectly fine. And so I eventually convinced them to, you guys see where this is going? And so I convinced them to head back to the dorm, like, hey, let's go back and be done. They're like, all right, we're out of money, so we're good to go. I'm like, yay. And so we get back to the dorm, and the only parking spot is like on the other side of the parking lot, because like that's just the way things go. And so I parked my car, and they brought hockey bags to put all the beer into. And the hockey bags are they're big, like the ones you guys make in Fax, but big enough to put a person in, because you have to fit all the hockey equipment. They had hockey bags, and they were throwing the cans of beer in there, and they had the back of my car popped open. They were throwing all the beer in, and I'm watching, and I'm like, this makes me so nervous. And I'm like, hey, I have an idea. How about I go get the guys from our dorm floor to come down and help you? And they're like, oh, that's nice of you. I'm like, yeah, nice. It also gets me really far away from this. And so I go, all right, I'll be back a little bit. And I leave. them at my car behind me, and I walk over to my dorm. And as I'm walking across the parking lot, I'm like, whoo, I made it. I'm like, bad stuff behind me. And as I'm walking across, from my left, voice out of nowhere, hey, where are you going? I turn over to look, and it's just two cops, just walking across the parking lot, because that's how my luck goes. And they're just walking up like, where are you going? And I'm like, to my dorm, building right there. And then they turn and go, what's in the car? To which I reply, car stuff. Nailed it. And I kept walking. While they're talking to me, I don't stop. I just keep on going towards the dorms. I'm like, I don't want to go in that direction. Bad stuff is over there. And they go, why don't you come over here? And I go, no. Because I don't want to. To which they change it and they go, son, come over here. And I go, okay. And so I walk over. Now this whole time, luckily, Fish and the 21-year-old heard all of this, and they took my blanket and threw it over everything in the back, slammed down the back of the big glass back of the car, and then just leaned against it nonchalantly because nothing illegal happening in this area. And so they just leaned against it. They brought me with like, son? And I go, uh-huh. They go, what's under the blanket in the car? Because you can see the blanket. And I go, I don't know. And they go, well, why don't we open it up and find out? And I go, no. Because it sounded like a question, and I did not want to. And they go, well, here's the problem. We think that there's something illegal under there, and we want to look. And I've seen enough cop shows to know that I can go, no. So I go, no. He goes, all right, there's two ways this is going to go down. I go, uh-huh. He goes, option one, you open the back of this car, we lift up that blanket, and we see what's underneath of there. And I go, well, what's option two? He goes, option two is my officer friend here and I are going to sit on your bumper and have a conversation while he calls for a tow truck. And the tow truck's going to come down here and it's going to tow your car down to the police station. When we get it to the police station, we're going to have a locksmith come out. And the locksmith is going to open up your trunk and we're going to take a look underneath that blanket. And if we find anything illegal underneath that blanket, we're going to come back here and then we're going to arrest you. And then you're going to have to pay for the tow truck and you're going to have to pay for the locksmith. What's your choice? I'm like, getting arrested and paying a lot of money. I'm like, both options suck. But this one cost me less money. So I opened up the back of the trunk. So I popped open the back of it and lifted up. And I still remember to this day, the two cops lifted up the blanket, and at the same time, they both did this. Oh, Jesus. When they saw how much beer was in the back of my car. And we were just thinking, that's not a good sound. And it was not. They then turned to the three of us, and they go, whose car is this? And the 21-year-old and Fish both look at me, and they go, his car. And the police officers turn to me, and they go, son, is this your car? And I seriously considered saying no, and just letting it be gone. But there we'll stop. I do not know if we'll get a chance to finish it tomorrow. We might have to wait till Friday, just so you know, or you can